Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another session of Orthodoxy Q&A. We've got Evan back with us. How we doing? Nice to see you again,
Thanks
sir.
for having me, Father.
So we've got, we're going to take a little bit of a hiatus. I think Demos is going to talk more about the administrative details of that.
Okay.
But we are upon Holy Week.
Indeed.
So
Indeed.
now everybody in the world thinks that that Holy Week begins with Palm Sunday. But actually, the way that we learned it at seminary is that Holy Week actually begins with Lazarus Saturday. Now, a lot of people don't necessarily know that, and sometimes you'll hear people say, "Oh no, it's Palm Sunday, it's not Saturday." So, if it wasn't, okay, then what we have to commemorate his final and foreshadowing miracle that occurred by the raising of Lazarus before he enters into Jerusalem. So with the raising of Lazarus, we have this resurrection that we're going to see in its fullness on Sunday. So we begin with a resurrection and we end with a resurrection.
Love it.
So it's really Holy Week plus a day.
No, it's Holy Week. It's Holy Week, period. Because then you're back into the same thing, Holy Week plus a day. No. Holy Week plus a day is Friday.
There we go. So, yes, we'll be taking a 1 week hiatus next week because we'll have, 11 or 12 live streams going on throughout Holy Week, which starts on a Saturday and ends on that Sunday.
Yes, with the Agape Vespers,
Yeah.
the service of love there, as they say. We bought Demos a bed. He's going to be sleeping in the studio.
Demos has a light week, and we see.
Yes, that's a light week. He's just going to be goofing off the whole time.
I'll be sleeping in the church overnight. It'll be fantastic. My wife will love it.
Yeah.
But yes, we'll begin our first service, Holy Week live stream service. We'll begin this Saturday at 10 a.m. and then more excitement to follow.
Yeah. It sounds like our vestment videos have been. What episode are we on now?
Well, the next one that's coming out, and it's coming out tomorrow, is about non-liturgical vestments.
Okay, like the andari,
Yes.
the raso, the kalimafi, maybe.
Well, no, we just start with the andari and the calivaso, and then we move on.
Oh,
The next episode will be breaking it down into further and further pieces.
gotcha. So have we this is number 4 or 5?
This will be the fourth one, and then once we're releasing them more or less at the 2 week level right now because we did all the studio work.
Right.
And then we're going to take off from extra videos during Holy Week, and then the week after Holy Week we'll come back with episode 5.
Okay. And for those of us, for those Jewish brethren that have been watching us, we want to say Passover started yesterday, right? So happy, I don't want to say happy, but blessed Passover.
Yes, indeed.
Perfect. And we got a lot of questions to begin the evening off with.
Starting off pretty heavy. It's great.
Welcome back, Evan, to begin with.
Thank you.
And I know I just mentioned this about questions, but I want to bring up the fact that you started your first appearance on the show. You were mentioning about how you were starting the fasting for Lent, and you're doing a very strict fast. And now that we're towards the end of Lent, I was very curious to see how that was going and what experience you've had from it.
It's in most years I tend to approach Lent with the idea of going very, I guess, whether strict or a traditional monastic fast, and I always find that the food component for me, I know it can be a challenge for a lot of people is the food aspect. That for me has been, I guess, over the years and having partaken in the traditional fast, is the easier component. It is it's continuing to maintain a focus on our prayerful life and just being consistent in that regard. That I think is where I see the most benefit as we go through Lent and having just our focus redirected on our spiritual life. And
I think that's the most important thing there. So did you see a difference in your prayer life?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely say, traditionally, or just, historically, I get back to being more prayerful.
Okay.
And find that benefit, of, tending to our spiritual health and then the goal is obviously to continue with that, once we exit the Lenten period, and after the Paschal feast, and yeah, that's always the goal. I would say that I know that I may fall off the path in the future, and it's pretty much a certainty.
Okay, but that's
the idea is to get back up and get back on the path,
and not to despair.
Correct,
not to
correct.
despair, right?
And Lenten is always a great reminder of where it is important to just continue to keep our focus throughout the year in general.
And it's funny because St. John Climacus has said that pride is that most demonic of vices, because and he takes the example of fasting. So if you sometimes when you lose the fast, meaning that you don't carry the fast as you should, you fall into despair. Okay, sure. And then you just kind of give up and you say. But then on the other side, if you keep the fast, then what happens is then pride takes over and you say, look at me, yeah. I have fasted, and what have you done? You're there eating meat, and you're eating a piece of chicken, but I, like the Pharisee, right? Look how good I am. So there's a real balance of humility there.
There absolutely is, because I know I have also fallen in my earlier fasting years, when I had said, I felt like, I'm going to take this on and really, be strict on myself with it. I had found myself, looking at sometimes even, just people that are close to me in my life that I felt like, okay, we're sometimes supposed to do this as either a family or a community, and then I said, how come we're not all doing this together? And then it was like, I'm missing the mark if I'm like,
exactly.
If that's the approach that I'm taking
right.
with it. So
cool.
So yeah, we just accept that we everyone has to do it in a way that is they're called to do it, and obviously there are health reasons that certain people can't
right.
Partake as well. So
but as long as we approach it and out of that comes humility,
yeah,
then we're good.
Key. Absolutely.
All right.
Beautiful. So yeah, we'll get going with these questions here. We have our first question coming from Rigovich, saying, in regards to the existence of ghosts, some Orthodox fathers and teachings do speak of ghosts. So
I guess we wouldn't use the term ghost. I mean, you hear the term Holy Ghost, it's sometimes translated. But in that very classical Western style of Casper the Ghost and woo, so we don't believe in that. We believe in a spiritual presence, and many of the fathers of the church, to include some of the elders that we've had, Paisios and Sophronios, Suluan, they have all had that spiritual witness. But that has always been for a specific purpose. It's not disembodied spirits that are trapped on earth and are floating around helplessly doing something. These manifestations have always been given by God for a specific purpose. So yes, there are spirits.
Okay. Now I guess, to kind of piggyback with it, just as another word versus, ghosts, is there any type of take on paranormal activity, I guess, as sometimes people might call it, rather than ghosts, which is also a spiritual component, but that has taken some sort of ability to interact in the physical realm.
And so for the most part, we would see that more as demonic activity.
Okay.
Not again. There are the elders of the church, which I call the Yeronda, right? Elders of the church have always talked about that spiritual presence is always accompanied. A true spiritual presence, that is the grace given by God, is always accompanied by certain things in terms of the simplicity of the vision, the clear communication of the vision, the scent or the aroma that surrounds that vision. So those are some
like the presence of the saints or around the relics that
yes,
you might have.
Exactly.
Like
right. And sometimes what happens with these paranormals is there's some degree of confusion there about what spirit is this, what are they trying to tell us, and
that confusion usually is the work of the adversary.
The work of the adversary, right? Because God never means to confuse us. So his anytime that he allows that, the message will be clear. Just like it was, like it was to the Virgin Mary at the Annunciation. At the beginning, she was unsure, but he was very clear. Gabriel was very clear on, no, this is from God, and then proceeded.
Real quick, I saw some of the comments mentioning that there was a bit of an echo. That should be resolved right now. We're doing some small updates to this show, and we're trying to expand and get some better microphones and try to provide a better experience. So thank you very much for your patience as we start this conversion process.
I don't hear any echo.
Goodbye, everyone.
What else you got?
Okay, we've got our next question coming from Rebecca Shantz. States, there is certainly a stark contrast between God's wrath in the Old Testament calling his own cities prostitutes, etc., and Jesus' mercy in the New Testament.
Well, I think that's a very unfair connotation of God, because there are a significant amount, and in fact a more of God's eleimon, or mercy, that we find in the Old Testament, and we tend to pass over Jesus's anger in the New Testament. He called his disciples cowards. When Mary doubted him at the raising of Lazarus, the word that was used, it wasn't a sigh. It wasn't like, it was like, there was like a snorting, and that's the way it's translated.
Flipping over the tables,
right?
Yes.
The flipping over the tables of the money changers. So we have many instances where Jesus did show his anger. But we tend to gloss over those, and we tend to focus on those incidents where God is now punishing his people. And we do see evidence of that, those people that have abandoned him, all right? So, but at the same time, we see always acts of mercy in the old, many acts of mercy. The discussion that he had with Abraham. If you can find 1,000, 100, 10, 1. He had that discussion, and God was willing to show mercy on Sodom and Gomorrah. The minute that he expelled Adam and Eve out of the garden, the very next verse is, and he took care of them and he clothed them. Okay, he did not abandon Cain when he killed his brother. He just asked him, and then when he said, "You cannot send me out to the desert because, or out into the wilderness, because they will kill me." And he says, "No, I will provide you with a mark, and they will not kill you." So we do have evidence of a merciful and loving God in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. We have to make sure that we read carefully. We don't want to gloss over what he has done. That there has been violence in the Old Testament. We don't want to gloss over that, as Father Stephen DeYoung says. But at the same time, we have to look at the mercy that he's offered his people.
Sure. Then we have our next question coming from Nathan Graff. Says, your video or videos contain the ecumenical heresy that we Orthodox need to be united with other groups in order to be the one church, being being a priest of the true church. You should know that the Orthodox Church is already the one true church, and that the Catholics are heretics. Is his statement.
Well, okay, so I'm not disputing that we have the fullness of the faith. The Orthodox Church has the fullness of the faith. I'm not disputing that. However, we are commanded by Christ that we will preach the gospel to all nations. Okay, and part of that involves that we will engage in conversation with other denominations. That doesn't mean that we have to sacrifice our faith. It does now, and that's what's happened is people have taken the words that I've said about that we should practice ecumenism to mean that we must sacrifice elements of our faith. In order to have communion with the Catholic Church, we have to abandon our faith and become Catholics. That's not what I'm saying. So we have to be able to be in communication with other churches. Jesus Christ established one church, and for us to have the sin of pride to say that we are the only way on earth that you can be saved through this Orthodox Church, well, that's the sin of pride. Because now what we're saying is that God's grace cannot extend beyond our boundaries. So where Jesus says, and the Spirit will blow where it will, who are we to say that no, it doesn't blow where it will, it blows within the boundaries of the Orthodox Church? But what they're doing is they're confusing the statement of ecumenism with conversation, and they're confusing it with the idea that we are sacrificing elements of our faith, and that's not what we're saying.
Okay. And then we have Anesti Hadzisavas asking, if Jesus was born in China as the chosen people, do you think Europe or the Middle East would have believed or converted to Christianity?
Wherever Jesus appeared on earth, his mission would have been accomplished. So when he came to earth, when he fleshed himself and God became man on earth, he did it in the area of his chosen people. He could have gone anywhere, and his message would have been the same: preach the gospel to all nations. He would have chosen disciples, and it would have happened. So God is certainly not limited by geography.
Okay. Then we have Water Drinker. Hello, everyone.
Water Drinker.
The peace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you. What is the difference between a patriarch and a bishop and an archbishop? And can all the major cities have one of those?
So at the root, there are only 3 clerical ranks: deacon, priest, bishop. That's it. So every bishop is the same. The connotation of a metropolitan, of an archbishop, of a patriarch are simply titles of honor within that clerical rank. But no bishop is higher than any other bishop. That's why we always say the patriarch is first among equals. Okay, or one among equals. We don't have a hierarchical rank, let's say, as the Catholic Church does, where the Pope is the apex. We don't have that. We don't have that apex. So all they are is titles within a rank of bishop.
Gotcha.
And can each city typically no? I mean, every city.
Which said, can all the major cities have one of those? So
all the major cities can have one of those.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Right, correct.
Real quick, we got some follow-ups from Mark Gassard, who says, Nathan, stop the Orthodox status mentality. If you are Orthodox and secure in your faith, be open. Orthodoxy does not teach that my faith is better than your faith mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
And Water Drinker says he wishes us the very best. He says, May our great God and Savior Jesus Christ bless your guys' work. So,
thank you very much. And that's, like I said, that I said before. We are very careful with the sin of pride. That whatever success we have obtained through the grace of the Holy Spirit. So, if we had been speaking heresy, then I think that I'm very confident that this show would have had much greater problems, and I don't think that we would have had the success that we have.
And our next question comes from Diane L. Fortunately, I have a little bit of knowledge thanks to the Greek school that I attended here as a child. But it says this is part in Greek. So, what do you mean by εκπλήρωση του Πάσχα την αληθινή αποκάλυψη in your church newsletter?
Now, real quick, for those who don't speak Greek, if you can translate that.
Okay. So I've got it.
She said, εκπλήρωση του Πάσχα την αληθινή αποκάλυψη.
So the So the fullness of Pascha, the
truth.
fullness of the truth of Pascha to be revealed, Apocalypse to be revealed. So, and where's that?
That is in your newsletter, the church newsletter.
Put that in my newsletter.
Yes, and what did you mean?
In the recent edition, I put that.
Maybe it was one of the newsletters.
Look what you've done, Diane.
Father is leaving.
Look what you've done.
We are now having to confirm that this actually exists
now
in the
we have,
newsletter.
Evan questions answered.
Yeah.
As a DJ, what kind of music do you like to play at churches?
I think actually one of my favorite chants is oh man, I know you put me on the spot here. There's some really lovely ones. Actually, let me.
Come on, Christos Anesti.
Well, I mean, Christos Anesti is a nice one. But I would have to say, ooh man, like there is.
Now I'm having you look stuff up. This is all backfiring on me.
Yeah, I know. This is where we're. Well, there's a few. I'm trying to think of probably.
Okay. I'm looking to see here where I had put that. I thought maybe I had put that in the somewhere in the notation of the services of Holy Week. Where I had written them in Greek, and I thought maybe it was there, but
March 2023, page 3.
March 2023. Okay.
So, don't worry, Diane.
we've got to find the March one. I'm looking at the April one, so
all right.
we'll take a look. We'll come back to that one.
All right.
Then she also asked, what does it mean for a liturgy to be pre-sanctified?
Through the canons of the Church, we are required to conduct during the middle of the week, for the strength of the Orthodox faithful, we are required to conduct a liturgy, but not a full liturgy. So a pre-sanctified liturgy is where the lamb has been pre-sanctified at the previous Sunday liturgy. So I'll cut 2 lambs, and then that second lamb I will then tincture with the wine, with the blood that has been sanctified already, right?
Do I explain lamb to people just because people might be thinking that you're talking
about an actual slaughtering of a lamb, right?
A little bit of lemoni and
that's
and
right.
Olive oil on top of, a little arni there, but the lamb.
So I have the chalice, and then I have the paten, and so I have the prosphoro, the bread. With the lance, I will cut out a small square from the center of that bread, and that represents Christ. Okay,
the lamb in this case,
and that represents then the lamb that was led to slaughter, right?
Yes.
Okay, and so on that particular Sunday before a pre-sanctified liturgy, I will cut 2 of those quote unquote lambs, and then I will then pre-sanctify one of them, meaning that I will tincture it with the consecrated wine, and then I will store it in what's called a pyx or a box. And then that Wednesday, and typically pre-sanctifieds are done during Lent on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Okay, and then that liturgy that is conducted does not have a consecration portion to it because that lamb has already been pre-sanctified. And so that's what the faithful will partake. So it's an abbreviated, to some extent, an abbreviated version of the liturgy because it does not have the consecration portion attached to it.
I highlighted where it is.
Oh, okay.
Oh, in the newsletter.
Yeah, good thing we have an archive on the website.
That's right. Okay. Yes, this is a letter. The Isagogitis Megalis Tesarkosti. Sorry, I got it. Okay. And so it was an article in every once in a while I try to put an article in Greek. and because we still have a lot of parishioners that
Sure.
that's what they like reading, and so I try to make articles that will help them understand some of the services, especially during the Sadducosti period and during Holy Week, and then certainly then the Resurrection. This particular one is Sadducosti being the 40 days of Lent. Right. Yeah, right. Desera, 40. Right.
For those that don't speak Greek there.
Okay. And so the Isagogi is our entrance into now Great Lent. And so it just talks about that. Okay. And I'm just looking to either. So I wrote a not I wrote, but for an article, η Σαρακοστή είναι πνευματική ταξίδι και προορισμός. So Great Lent is a spiritual journey, and you said at the beginning, right? It's a spiritual journey, okay, that is going to have its telos, its end, in Pascha, right, in the Great Resurrection. And it is είναι η γιορτή των εορτών. So it is the festival of festivals, right? This is the greatest festival. In fact, that's why it's not even one of the 12 great feasts of the church, because it's outside of that even. So it's not even counted as one, okay? So είναι ένα προετοιμαστία. So it is a preparation, okay? And that's where it comes. So Lent is that beginning preparation so that we can fulfill, or that we can see the fullness of what Pascha is, the truth of Pascha. And it can be revealed to us. Because without passing through the cross, we can't understand the beauty of the resurrection, right? The suffering, right, gives us purpose and meaning. We understand what Jesus went through, and when we emerge on the other side, now we understand why the resurrection is so great, because it shows our fall into sin. It shows our despair as we move through that. And we can't see the fullness of Pascha if we haven't
experienced at least a taste of it, because
a taste of the suffering portion of them.
Exactly, because there's no way to fully understand that.
And what is Pascha? Pascha is passion. It is a passion in not in a sexual way.
And then we have our next question. We have a greetings from DC. Then we have Father from CP rather. Father, you made a video during early COVID stating communion could not transmit disease. Then as COVID got serious, you made a video saying that it is historically acceptable to change the process.
Yeah, I see no issue with that. So the Orthodox position has always been that communion cannot negatively affect us. It is always to our salvation, both physically and spiritually. It leads to our salvation. What Archbishop Elbia IV said, which caused a lot of consternation, is he said the mechanism of communion, the spoon, the cup, tweezers, plastic, whatever, that mechanism, okay, can be problematic. And that's where there was a lot of consternation about, well, wait a minute now, that means we can't take communion, and that's not what he was saying. What we believe is that communion is never harmful. Now, the second part of that, read that one again.
And that as COVID got serious, you made a video saying it is historically acceptable to change the process. So
yes, and it is, because originally we received communion in the hand. Mm-hmm. I placed it in your hand, and then you took it, and then that changed to tongs, and then it changed to a spoon. Those are historical changes. Now, it doesn't take away from the fact that communion is communion.
Right. And then CP also says in Leviticus 16, God orders Aaron to make blood/animal sacrifices. At the end of the chapter, he says, "This shall be an everlasting statute unto you, the children of Israel." seeing that God said that this is an everlasting statute, why do we no longer do this?
Wasn't that part of the old covenant?
Well,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So, so as it everlasting in the sense that, as Demos said, that this was the covenant that he made with his people. Okay, but his final covenant was him taking on flesh and becoming human. All right. So the idea of sacrifice was everlasting. But now our sacrifice is what Jesus has done for us. So God sacrificed himself for us. So the process of sacrifice is everlasting. But the mechanism of that has now been fulfilled in Jesus Christ. So that the slaughter of animals is no longer
necessary.
Right, are part of that covenant.
And Diane says that Chag Samech, which I know I'm completely mispronouncing. Samek is Happy Holidays in Hebrew.
Oh,
Do you know how the Hebrew pronunciations to any degree? That
I mean, well, I started learning Hebrew with the previous my previous parish where I was working with the rabbi there, and so she was helping me with Hebrew, but not enough where if I saw it written in Hebrew, then I think I could pronounce it.
So it is right.
At least I can read the Hebrew. It's like Greek. I might not, sometimes
This is the just the spelling.
Hag Samech.
Hag Samech.
Yeah.
oh, there we go.
Beautiful.
And there's
And
also
that is what does that mean again?
Happy Holidays.
Happy holidays. Okay.
And then Demos, did you want to add something here?
Oh, just that Diane laments that with these changes, there'll be no more banging on the table. That's the goal. That's the goal. And then every once in a while...
I can bang on the table now?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. All right.
But, just to, eventually when we get rid of it, we'll have a nostalgic episode.
I think she's excited
where
about
all
it.
you will do is bang on the table.
That's all that I will I will do.
So you can remember the good old days. Let's continue. I think the next question is from Brooks Durham.
So we've got Brooks Durham. I am Catholic, but have been learning about Orthodoxy. This father is very intelligent. Enjoy listening to his answers.
Not a question, but thank you very much. Thank you very much, Brooks.
Wow, no, I appreciate that much. And see, I can tell Presbytera that somebody has actually thought I was intelligent, because usually people do not think that at all.
We should have saved this for the final episode.
With all those crazy things I've said, so he's got a whole blooper reel that we're going to do a blooper reel sometime, right? Because
that would be. I mean,
we've got.
Yeah, we have quite a few.
I'm sure Demos,
especially during the Sunday school recordings.
Yes.
Then from Ancient Apostolic, what would you say is the biggest factor for converts coming to Orthodoxy, as you have seen in the parish?
The biggest
factors that converts have come to Orthodoxy, as far as what you've experienced.
Well, probably the biggest thing, and especially coming, obviously the vast majority of them, if not all of them, are coming from America. So shedding a Western mentality is very, very difficult. I mean, it's hard to undo the thinking that you've been immersed in for, let's say, because usually they come to me in their mid-20s, right? So for 20 years, you've been immersed in original sin. You've been immersed in a church that the only thing that they provide is rules, and they want to lord themselves over me. The fact that I'm an individual and I can do whatever I want. The fact that being humble is more of a bad word in English. Humble people are viewed as weak, and we shouldn't be weak. Okay, so shedding. And that's not all, but shedding those American Western notions is very tough. Very, very tough. So it's not about really the language at all. That's not a stumbling block for people coming in.
All right. And then we have from MCLJN, Jesus the Father said, forgive them. Oh, we got moved here. Forgive them, for they not know what they do. Was he asking the Father to forgive them because they didn't know that they were killing the Son of God? But if so, the problem I have is he told them he was the Son of God and they rejected him. So this individual is saying that even though he says, forgive them for they know not what they do, some people knew, or at least, were told. However, yeah.
So, I mean, we have the same words coming from St. Stephen when he was stoned. He repeated Christ's words, and he said, forgive them for they know not what they do, right? Forgive them for what they do. So we have St. Stephen saying the same thing. Obviously, in the light of what Jesus said, but throughout, and especially prevalent in John's Gospel, we see Jesus constantly saying to the Pharisees, "You blind guides." So it's constantly saying that you do not see the light, and that you blame me for healing on the Sabbath, and you do not recognize the Father because you do not recognize you don't recognize me, who He sent. So constantly throughout the Gospels, we have Jesus calling out those people who could not see. And at the end, this is what we have now, is Him saying, forgive them, for they know not what they do, because in their spiritually blind state, they are not realizing who Jesus is.
Sure.
And many, many times He did tell them who He was. She's absolutely right.
And then we have a question from Aaron. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
First, what would be the best way to answer the question, how do we know Jesus is God? And which scripture passage is best to cite? And I'm assuming she, might be asking in the context of, someone's either having a conversation, someone's like, well, how do you know that Jesus was God? Is there any specific passage that you...
Any specific passage where Jesus legit, straight up, and I know, I don't remember the verses off the top of my head, where He straight up says, I am the Son of God.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned for... Okay.
Did you ever think of the chant that you really like?
Yeah, I did actually. Exomologiste ton Kyrion. Is actually
And then why does that speak to you so much?
I just think it's a really beautiful chant. It's exomologiste is to...
I acknowledge and confess.
Yeah. To ton Kyrion. I guess the Kyrion is
Lord. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I confess, and I confess that the Lord is God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is perfect.
Going right? Exactly to
See, I knew that ahead of time.
Yeah,
that's why.
I knew that I should wait to answer that question for this.
This is Father Maggos' support team.
Yes, there we go.
Can we get some Jeopardy background music going here?
If we want to get a copyright strike, yeah.
And I just
then we would be in jeopardy.
So I'm not even allowed to hum it, right?
I don't know. I had.
I mean, not that my tone would be, I think, good enough to actually catch it, but.
On one of the very old YouTube video I did for somebody else, there was a part where one of the hosts hummed the 1980s theme to Magnum PI, and it got a copyright strike.
Wow.
Which either his humming was extremely good.
So enlighten me now as somebody who has yet to receive any copyright strikes, or maybe I haven't. I didn't know.
Well, it wasn't strike is too strong. But we got copyright notice. Strike is actually far more severe.
Okay, but they're not. It wouldn't actually close the live.
No, it depends on. Sometimes it depends on the studio. It depends on what the claim is. Most music artists, they have it so they take a percentage of what you make on the video if you get not that anybody listening to this is really going to want to hear all the specifics about the ins and outs of life on YouTube, but it's there, and it's to describe it as a migraine headache would be giving it way too much of a pass.
Okay. So if we go to John, and I use John because it's it is the theological gospel. And if we go to John chapter 5, and I'm down into like verses 30, 37. If I bear witness myself, my witness is not true. There is another one who bears witness of me and knows that the witness of me is true. You search scriptures for eternal life. Good grief!
This is what I like about you, Father. You always want to find like the specific line. You don't want to just go off by memory.
Most assuredly, I say to you, the hour is coming, the dead will hear the voice of the Son. The Father has life in him, so he has granted the Son also to have life in himself, and has given him the authority to execute judgment. That speaks to what about what he is. Doesn't say it exactly. And the Father himself, who sent me, has testified of me. But you do not have him because his word does not abide in you. But if we go to, and that begins to speak about who he is. I am the one who bears witness of myself and the Father who sent me. And you can argue, well, that's not very clear. So then you finally get down to here, John chapter 8, and you get down into 58 and 59. The Jews said to him, you are not yet 50 years old, and you say you have seen Abraham. And he says, most assuredly I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. And so he uses the title and the name of God himself. And so, and then to clarify the fact of the blasphemy of that to the Jews, next line is they took up stones to throw at him. So the sign of blasphemy. So he says to them, before Abraham was, I am, saying that he existed
prior to.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the other one that I was looking for that I couldn't find is he says, and glorify me, O Father, with the glory that I had you before the world was created, so that they were partners in that they were partners in creation, that Jesus Christ was present with the Father together with the Holy Spirit at the time of creation. That was the other one that I was looking for. So those are the two that, and I hate to use the word proof text because we're not trying to prove the existence of Jesus, but this is where those two are where he actually shows that he is one with God.
There's
Sorry that took so long.
Wasn't also after he walked on water, if memory serves correctly, wasn't that part that when the disciple said, "You are the Son of God, for you have done this," and he says, "Blessed are you for." I don't remember the specifics, but for knowing. Yeah,
I thought that was blessed are you that believe. So their acknowledgement of him as God is not necessarily a proof, because we have a lot of people out here who acknowledge all kinds of people as God. You've probably got somebody out there acknowledging you as God, right? You know?
Yeah, but they only tithe once a month.
Once a month, so
so.
But yes, those are the two passages. So throughout John, he alludes to the fact that he is, but then there are two specific passages where he actually uses the direct connection that he and God are one, and that's present in the John where I read that, chapter 8.
And then Yana asks why in the Orthodox Church we use risen bread for prosphora instead of flat in the Old Testament in particular prohibits to use bread.
Actually, in the Catholic Church, you use unleavened bread. And that is in recognition of our Jewish heritage, right? That we come from the Jews. In the Orthodox Church, Christ is the leavening agent. And so not that we have a better view, we have a different view. So they are recognizing, the Catholic Church is recognizing that there is a Jewish heritage, which Jesus said, "Do you not know that you are grafted from the root?" That vine is grafted from the, but equally so, it is Jesus who leavens the full loaf, who makes it full now. And so that's why we use leavened bread.
We got some follow-ups. Kathy W. points out John 8:56 is where Jesus said, "I am."
That's the one, yes.
John 8:58. And Water Drinker points out God the Father calls the Son Jesus Christ, the Creator God in Hebrews chapter 1. Water Drinker continues to say St. John, Paul, Thomas, Peter called Christ God. And in the book of Isaiah, Christ is called the mighty God. But that kind of goes along with what you just said earlier, that them acknowledging him, it's about Jesus acknowledging it himself.
Right. That's the question was, does Jesus acknowledge his divinity? And yes, he does. Certainly, the disciples did declare him. Thomas, right? You are Lord, you are God. Peter certainly did. But the question was specific about, did Jesus acknowledge his divinity?
And then we have our next question coming from Brooks Durham. How does confession differ between Catholicism and Orthodoxy?
And again, I certainly don't want to speak for the Catholic Church, but the Orthodox tend towards the therapeutic value of confession. So sometimes, and this is not to say that Catholic theology is what Catholic theology is, but there tends to be a much more legalistic approach to confession in the Catholic Church, meaning that a sin has been committed, then there must be justice that is done, a penance is issued, okay, and then that sin is absolved. So there tends to be a much more legalistic relationship coming from their Roman heritage. All right. In the Orthodox Church, we do certainly have absolution, but the concern is on the therapeutic value of confession, meaning that with confession comes a cleansing of the heart. And again, the heart is, for us, the centrality of our spirituality. And so what our confession is seeking to do is not to necessarily absolve somebody of their sins, but to get them to understand what is the danger of that sinful behavior, right? If you are an alcoholic, there's another thing, right? We're going to say, oh, that, you know, okay. If you're an alcoholic, I can take the bottle away from you, right? Okay, sure. And pour it down the drain, okay, and say you shouldn't drink. And then you will go out and buy another bottle of alcohol, right? And just make sure I don't see it, okay? The idea with confession is that, do you see what or how you are degrading in terms of what alcohol is doing to you? And I've got to explain that to you, and you've got to comprehend what that is, and that gets you to stop. But me taking your bottle away, quote unquote, absolving you of your sin, that doesn't really do anything for you.
There has to be an actual.
Do you think that the Catholic confessional booth ends up becoming a barrier to that kind of therapeutic value of confession?
Okay, we think so. All right. The idea with the booth is that if you don't see the priest, then it might be a little bit easier for you to believe that you are confessing to God. Now, again, because even we will tell you that. Don't look at me as your priest. Just think of me as you're confessing to Christ. Well, that's easier said than done. When you know the priest, it is a hard and difficult thing as a human being to admit your flaws, because then you're always afraid. I mean, I could see that. I mean, that's a big reason why I didn't go to confession, is I didn't want somebody else knowing all my dark secrets, right? Okay, so the idea was, if you don't see who that is, it's a little bit easier, right? Okay, but with us, Orthodox, the idea is when I come face to face with my father confessor, then he automatically becomes I become accountable to him, because now he's going to check up on me. I'm going to say, if we go back to the alcoholic situation, right? We talk about this. I know that you're not just magically healed, so I'm going to see you on a daily basis. Check in. How you doing? Hey, what's going on? You know that if you've got an issue or problem, you can call me up and say, I'm really struggling with this. I don't know what to do. Can we meet and have a coffee? Blah, blah, blah. So I stay in touch. So the
there's
personal
that relationship there.
Exactly. Exactly right.
And I've definitely found that to be, beneficial. Is with
your spiritual father.
With him, or or my spiritual life as well. And then it asks now. I guess I'm kind of going back. So this was back to the bread. It says this kind of bread in the temple from Yana was saying, is this was prosphor the kind of bread that was in the temple? Is that
that's what they call the show bread. That is not the same type of bread. The show bread was for a different purpose. The bread that we are using is what Jesus Christ performed at the Last Supper. He took bread and he broke it, and so in memory of that action,
which is
specifically that action
said within the
context of
like the
anaphora.
Yeah,
yep.
exactly.
Mm-hmm. Right. So no, we are not comparing that with the showbread.
Real quick, CP has a follow-up to the earlier question. The earlier question being that seeing that God said this is an everlasting statute, and that's the blood animal sacrifice, why do we no longer do this? And they have a follow-up where they specifically said, but everlasting, the word, it's unambiguous. So how do you deal with that?
But that's what I said, that the sacrifice itself is everlasting. Okay? That we don't, we at every single liturgy are not repeating, but we are recalling that sacrifice. So in that sense, that sacrifice is everlasting, because we are commanded to do
just
that.
Not that specific physical component of slaughtering. Of
Right. It's just, I don't want to say that we are re-crucifying him. That's not what we're doing. But we are everlastingly recalling the sacrifice that he did for our salvation.
Beautiful. And then Kathy W. asks, are Genesis, Isaiah, Proverbs, Exodus, Ezekiel, and Job read any other time besides Great Lent?
Those are, though, many times. Remember, the Old Testament readings are read during our Vesper services. I'm trying to think of other times where we read Old Testament. We read it during during Vesper services. We read Old Testament. Obviously, we read it during the pre-sanctified liturgies.
I want to say that recently I remember a reading about Abraham, but I don't remember from which service. But it wasn't a Vesper service.
So it might have been the pre-sanctified liturgies.
Maybe,
we do have a lot of Old Testament. We have Old Testament readings in the Orthros, right? We have the 6 Psalms. Yep. Sometimes in Vespers we have the 19th Psalm. And then,
but just not specific. Like I guess she was asking specifically Genesis, Isaiah, Proverbs versus like Psalms, or Ezekiel and Job. Like, are those? I'd have to take a look at our Vesper services, and see, because again, those change with each Saturday, right? That we do Vespers. So and you can do Vespers every single day like they do in the monasteries, and there's Old Testament readings in there. So I've got to believe that there are readings from Genesis, Job, like I said, Ezekiel. I can look. I could go through a couple of the Vesper services and find that, but that's where we would find that in the Vesper service.
Is there an Old Testament book that gets the least representation? Like from your experience, is there one particular book that's completely overlooked? Should I say?
Well, where
I bet you don't have too many from Deuteronomy.
What?
Deuteronomy
Numbers with the laws,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Because again, remember, if the Orthodox Church is going to read Old Testament readings, what's the purpose of reading an Old Testament reading? To foreshadow Christ. So something in there has to foreshadow
What is to come?
what is to come. So in that case, some like, let's say, we might not have from Baruch, we might not have from the book of Ruth, we might not have from Amos, we would have from Hosea.
Didn't Ruth directly lead to the Christ bloodline?
Yeah, she's mentioned in that. So maybe Ruth could be in there. Daniel is certainly in there. We have readings from Kings. Tobit. I don't know if I don't remember Tobit being in there. There are some places where we read the Maccabees, not too much. Certainly Wisdom of Solomon, along with the Psalms. Esther, Judith. I don't think that those I've seen read. So some of the minor prophets, I would say, some of the minor prophets is where we don't see the reading so much.
Okay, and then Aaron asks, when a non-blessed item comes into contact with an item that is blessed, does the same grace and blessing pass on to the first item, or I'm assuming it's passed on from the first item?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I mean, same thing goes with individuals. If a blessed saint passes by another human being, does that human being automatically become blessed, change his life? Not necessarily. So no.
And then Yana asks, how come did they not celebrate Passover after the time of Judges until the king Jehoshaphat?
Oh, oh man, there's an Old Testament question there.
That's a research question.
Boy, that's a research question.
We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it in 2 weeks, Yana. I'll make a note of it.
Making sure we're getting a snapshot of that.
You don't remember the legend of King
Jehoshaphat?
Jehoshaphat.
At least I've heard the term before, or the person. I've heard the person before.
Rex Hedon asked, when it comes to food in the Jewish religion, we're getting a lot of Old Testament things here.
I'm seeing.
Some things are not allowed to be eaten. Is there anything like that in the Orthodox religion?
Is there anything that we are not allowed to eat?
Nothing that I've heard. The only thing that, and this is only biblical, that came out from the first synod in Jerusalem. The only thing I could think of that came out was they had a discussion about between James, Peter, Paul, and they were discussing what should and should not be new Christians be allowed to eat and not eat, and the only thing that they disallowed was blood.
Seems reasonable.
Justin Messer, Tobit is read in wedding liturgies in the Western churches and Western Rite Orthodoxy.
Tobit,
is read in wedding liturgies in the Western churches and Western Rite Orthodoxy.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting.
Tobit got some representation.
Wow. So I'm curious as to why. Why would we read? I mean, Tobit was the Archangel Raphael, right? And Raphael. Now, remember that was an old question about is it okay to lie? The angel lied, right? So, but that would be an interesting question as to why is Tobit read?
We'll take a look at that.
And then Gracious G asks, how do I explain sacrifice of Jesus to my 3-year-old daughter if she doesn't understand the concept of death? It's a good question.
Well, so maybe we don't have to carry it all the way to death. Okay. God came to earth for a specific purpose, and that was because we could not reach him, he came to be
To
with
us.
us. He came to us so that we could reconnect with him. Okay,
Through Christ.
through
Jesus.
through God enfleshing himself as the second person of the Trinity. Okay, so if that is the reason why he came, and part of that was a sacrifice, maybe one of the ways that you can present that is that what would you as a parent do for your child? Okay, so you would, you would protect, so you could say to, is it her?
For a daughter.
Daughter.
Yeah.
So you could say to your daughter, you're very important and you're very special to me, just like all of us are special to God. And so I would do whatever I need to protect you, my daughter, from harm, even if that meant that I would get hurt. And so Jesus or God does the same thing for us. He loves us so much that he is willing to be hurt so that he can protect us. So you might try it in that way.
What about teaching about possibly teaching the concept of sacrifice, right? If it's a 3-year-old daughter, I assume she probably has a favorite toy, a favorite stuffed animal, and so forth. And what if you pose the question, if you were to give up this your favorite toy to make other children who need help, if that would help them? What I'm saying is reframing it from their point of view, where they have to give up something so they realize that there is a sacrifice that's made, and that way you can start empathizing with the sacrifice of Jesus. It's a beginning, not a totality.
Yeah. What I didn't want to do is, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but what I didn't want to do is I wanted to keep this between humans. I didn't want it to have a material connotation, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes that can lead us astray, because we are offering a material possession that doesn't hurt us. I mean, yeah, we feel bad that we lost it, but to
That would be
take
good.
harm upon myself, that's different than just
Yeah.
giving a toy. It could start that discussion, but it has to be completed through.
See, that could apply to Lent, or the Lenten period at that point.
Yeah.
And then, so CP asks, can we violate the 10 Commandments since the New Covenant supersedes it? How can we determine what is now invalid in the Old Testament?
We absolutely cannot, because Jesus was very clear. Anyone who transgresses even one iota of the law shall be held accountable. Those are not, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Okay, but the reason that we can't is not just because Jesus said it. I mean, that's the best reason. Okay, but the other reason is that as Christians, all of the commandments have a much deeper meaning. There's no commandment that we can ignore and still be a Christian. All right? So, and they all take on a much deeper meaning. It is not a Christian attitude for me to harm somebody. It is not a Christian attitude for me to not love God. It is not a Christian attitude for me to steal from somebody or to make something else an icon of him.
Real quick, we got a super chat in from Aaron. Thank you very much, Aaron.
Thank you, sir.
And the question is, so if we rub cloths, prayer ropes, or any items on a saint's reliquary or wonder-working icon, the items remain the same?
We want to be careful with material objects. We are not a faith of magic, and sometimes there's this idea of if we have contact with, and we started to talk a little bit about this. Yeah. If we have contact with someone who is a saint, then that power transfers to us, and it doesn't work that way at all. An item can become a channel of grace, but it must become a channel of grace for a specific purpose, okay? So, and mainly that purpose is for the deepening of our faith, okay? So the experience that comes from being in the presence of a saint, or the experience that comes from grace that we may receive through that saint from the Holy Spirit, and that transforms us. And you use that word, Evan, to transform, and that's really what that's all about. That's what's important. So it's not the object, and what happens if we focus on the object as like rubbing it against a saint or something like that, and then that's transmitting that power, we have thought of it incorrectly. All those items can become for us is a channel of grace, but they have no power in of themselves.
So real quick, we got another follow-up from Aaron, since we just had the super chat, who references that the first question they asked was where did Jesus mention, where in the Bible is it that Jesus says that he is God, right? And he points out that the context of that question was in regards to responding to a non-Christian asking. And I personally would just like to throw in, like, from the perspective of, putting myself in the perspective of a non-Christian, even if I read the line of Jesus saying, I am God, in a book that I didn't necessarily believe, that wouldn't have too much of an effect on me. What would be possibly the best conduit or the best citation in the Bible to begin that journey to understanding of Christ as God?
The book of John. I mean, the book of John is our theological gospel. I mean, if you don't want to find God, then you're not going to find God. I mean, that's why for us, this idea that constantly can come up in a Western mind of, if God can be proven to me, then I will believe, is backward thinking for us. There has to be a start that God does exist, and then I can work from there. All right? So there is nothing I can do to scientifically prove to you that God exists. I can't do it. I mean, we can't, and all these people that say, let me prove to you that God exists. If you are not from the standpoint or the starting point that there is a creator of the universe, and that there is a well, I hate to say essence, okay, but that there is a personhood of somebody who is before time and before creation, then there's not really anything that I can do. I mean, as Christians, we're not called to prove to you that God exists. What we are called to do is to bring you to the point that you can experience that for yourself. Knowing God is not a rationalistic and a philosophic, thank you.
It sounded good, though.
It sounded good, though, right?
It's not. I was gonna let you run with it.
Yeah, I mean, I was going with that.
You questioned it a little, so I figured.
What did you say?
Philosophic.
A philosophic exercise. It has to come from the heart. I mean, that is all the Orthodox texts. When you read them, they begin from that illumination of the heart, and that's what sees God. And so that has to be the starting point.
Well, it was interesting, from you say from a scientific point of view. There was someone years ago that I had watched, in a video, who was a physicist, and he kind of, he was talking about the laws of physics. Actually, is what he had mentioned is that what proves God. If you talk about it is predating everything. It is something that is not physical but works upon the physical, and it was an interesting way to kind of pose that, like, those components, like if somebody were to look at it from a scientific point of view, that is kind of basically is if I were to look at, so the biblical God was not physical, acts on the physical, created the physical from nothing, and predates the universe. And the basically laws of nature, set of forces, are not physical, act on the physical, create the physical from nothing, and then predates the universe as well. So that was an interesting way of kind of, talking about, the showing that there is a creator, and this creator is, something like, a lot of time, the best way that I kind of describe a lot of it is, science is man trying to make sense of the miracles of the creator.
Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, I can see that. And God allows the continuing revelation of himself through advancements in science. He can reveal himself through science. But again, these are observer exercises.
Sure.
If you remain in a state where you are an observer of God, then you will never know God. The only way to know God is to experience Him. Which
is what Orthodoxy is a very big part of it is, it's not a passive faith. It's a very live,
living faith. You have to allow Him to touch you.
Beautiful. And then where we have now, MCLJN asks, the Orthodox believe that Mary was kept from intentionally sinning while know that she shouldn't, or so I was reading. Where do the Orthodox get this concept from?
Where?
I
don't know where they got that. I've never heard that one before. They kept her from sinning?
Well, it says Mary was kept from intentionally sinning or sinning while knowing that she shouldn't. I guess I've not heard that myself, because I would say that even in the accepting of carrying the, containing the uncontainable, it was, when the angel Gabriel presented, it was still a choice that she had to accept that.
And, God didn't just pick her off the street. She was dedicated to the temple.
Sure.
I mean, she was living in, I don't want to say a monastery, but she was dedicated to the temple. This is a woman who willfully gave herself to God.
By removing her free will, so to speak, it devalues that.
Absolutely,
it devalues. I don't like that.
Yeah. Absolutely not. So I'd have to see where, who. Again, remember, not everybody who claims to be Orthodox, we have to believe their writings, right?
Sure.
We've had some,
It's a good question.
Even among the saints. I mean, we've had heretical teachings from Origen. We've had Saint John Chrysostom, who was a anti-Semitic. We've had Saint Gregory of Nicaea, who claimed that all souls will eventually be redeemed. So even just because the church says they're a saint, it doesn't mean that everything they say is correct. Sometimes the church rejects some of what they say
because they're human.
Thank you very much.
There you go. And Stuart McKenna would like to thank you for recommending God is a Man of War. Read it twice and let a friend borrow it. Happy to read it too, and said it was very good. Thanks again.
Yeah, that's a great book to read to help explain unapologetic about the fact that there are terrible things that have happened in the Old Testament, and not to reduce them to spiritual metaphors. These are terrible things that have happened, and how do we, in our Christian faith, reconcile that?
Yeah, that was from like a month where violence in the Bible tended to be like
the theme, right?
And that we noticed that it happens. These themes come in waves.
Yeah, exactly.
Then is the next one. We got Water Drinker. I know we've got some other comments here.
I love that name. We always get these interesting names on here.
Yeah, there's
more or less.
I want Whiskey Drinker. Where is Whiskey Drinker?
Well, not during Lent.
Not during Lent.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Whiskey Drinker will.
Maybe Water Drinker becomes Whiskey Drinker.
Whiskey Drinker after Paschal. Okay, got it. All right.
Asks, are we not allowed to receive the Holy Communion every day or even more than once a day?
Well, it's not so much that we're not allowed to, but the question is, once we have received it, why would we need to take it again in the same day?
Sure.
So we are repeating the event of the Last Supper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are receiving then the salvific component of Jesus Christ. So there's really no reason to receive communion more than once a day.
All right.
And the other reason for that too is I don't see how we can be prepared to receive it every day. I mean, we're sinners, and there is a preparation time that has to happen. And so how do we prepare every single day?
Yeah.
If you do it multiple times a day, I mean, once again, I think that devalues it too. It becomes a snack. It should be something more, it's communion. It's something.
So right, respect the sacramental power of it. Right.
And is it even offered more than twice a day? I mean, like, I know that I'm sure there's some occasions in which where there's like the morning. I guess.
That's a good point because
it's not. I would say, or even every day is the.
Well, you could go to the monastery, right?
Sure.
And
okay. So there's
but even that, I think that if the monks saw you every day, they would question you and say, "What do you do?
What's going on?
What's going on here?" Right. So you couldn't receive it more than once a day because all the liturgies are only done once a day anyway.
Sure.
Unless you have very good timing and multiple Orthodox churches nearby.
What if you have a liturgy in the morning and a vesper liturgy at night?
Yeah, but what?
So Presbytera asked, "What if you have liturgy in the morning and vesper service at night?"
Vesper liturgy.
Liturgy.
Vesperal liturgy.
Vesperal liturgy. Yeah, because technically it's the next day, so I could technically have that. So again, it would be in that case that would be an instance where you could have two liturgies in the same quote unquote day, but I would revert back to the first idea: is if you've already received it in the morning, what is your purpose for wanting to receive it again so early?
Makes sense.
Let's do things with a purpose to them.
Oh, we've got a nice contribution from Diane L.
Thank you, Diane.
Asking, so if you take communion, should you take the antitheron?
Yes. Don't. I wouldn't even worry about that. There are all kinds of. I shouldn't say all kinds, but there are really two kinds of thoughts on that. Sometimes you'll hear people say that I shouldn't be putting the andidero out when people are receiving communion, okay? But then I've heard the other argument, which is part of the reason that you have the andidero afterwards is just to make sure that everything is swallowed, right? So that nothing, as you're talking, nothing comes. Yeah. So you have the andidero to ensure that everything is going down your throat. So again, there's no crime, right? There's no canonical law that says, no, you can't have andidero, but that's sometimes you'll see people say, nothing else should touch your mouth after you receive communion. But I'm going to go inside the coffee hour and I'm going to have donuts, right? Okay, so yes, something's going to touch my mouth afterwards. So, sometimes we just got to be cautious with that. And Diane, I did receive your package. Just got it today. Today was quite a busy day. With we have a new guest that you all will see next week. So I was busy with him this today. So I did not have a chance to open the package. Thank you very, very much. And we're also going to take up your idea on our visit to Greece. So Diane, Ted, thank you very much.
Beautiful. And we have actually just coming in what are these called?
Super chats.
Super chats
from Tommy.
Tommy
Welcome
Williams.
back, Tommy.
Is it a serious sin to take communion while in sin?
When are you not in sin?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, if that bothers you, and there's nothing wrong with being bothered by that, then I strongly suggest that you adhere to the Orthodox requirement that confession should precede communion, because at least what that does is helps that purification process and that preparation process as you prepare to receive communion. So if that is something that is bothersome to you, then communion before the practice that we have is I would highly advise. Now,
so he said like while in an unworthy state is kind of what he followed that up with. So I think in many cases we are unworthy, but we still have that grace that we are.
We certainly are unworthy, and in fact, the prayers during the liturgy, if you read the priest prayers, they say, "Unworthy as we are, I ask that you allow me to with boldness and confidence to approach you."
And that's part of like the prayer that we're supposed to be
the pre-communion prayer, exactly. Prayer. Now, all right, if you're in a state of deep sin, like okay, on your way here you just brutalize somebody or you stab somebody, and then I would say, okay, that's a state of sin, yeah. Or you've had like a knockdown drag out with your boyfriend, your wife, your mom, your father. You're not in a state of peace, right? And you must approach in a state of peace. So yes, we're all unworthy. We all sin, but we can approach the cup with a state of peace about us. But things like that I just described do put your soul in a state of turmoil that makes it inappropriate for you to receive communion.
Okay, and that was okay. So here it's interesting. I'll just speak candidly of myself. Having been traveling quite a bit and was not hadn't been in church for a period of time.
Okay.
Where I there were moments of not necessarily a state of lack of peace, but where I felt maybe I had my heart was had gotten into maybe an argument with somebody, and,
right,
and I felt I didn't feel necessarily at ease in the same way that I want to, or that wasn't the state that I would, or the relationship that I would want to have with this individual.
Right.
And it's funny, a friend, a parishioner, I won't name any names, he said, he goes, maybe you shouldn't be taking communion. And my response was, I felt like I had been away from the cup for so long that my soul needed to partake and to have that body and blood of Christ to be a part of me, that I had felt like I do need a schedule for confession, so that's it's always a good time for that. However, what is your thought in that sense? Is it where I will do my prayer, and in that moment I'm not holding this anger or resentment that I'm approaching the cup angrily because of what might have happened, but coming to church, partaking of the liturgy, reading that prayer, and approaching the cup with humility and knowing that I am unworthy, and that this is something that I am feeling that as a sacrament I'm needing for myself spiritually.
So I say two things in that.
Yeah.
St. John Chrysostom speaks about if you hold any grudge against your brother, then he specifically says, then refrain from communion, go and reconcile with your brother, and then return to the cup. So that's St. John Chrysostom's advice to us.
Okay.
However, if
it's not necessarily holding a grudge, but you just say you had something that happened and there might have been a little tiff and you felt bad about it, but it's not like you're holding on to that, but it's something that you're.
But still, there's something to reconcile.
Sure.
With, right. The other point is that communion is for the healing of soul and body. So the prayer could have been, as I read the communion prayers, the pre-communion prayers, I also in there, let this be for the healing of my soul and body, so that I may reconcile with my brother, so that the action that comes out of the illumination of Holy Communion
is
reconciliation. So don't just don't just receive Holy Communion and then go, I'm good. And then go back.
Yeah.
So use it in the way that it was intended, which is it brought me an illumination and a humility, and now I'm going to do with that humility what I need to do and go back and reconcile.
Sure. Beautiful. Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And thank you for all these questions that allowed me to piggyback off of that as well. And then Carla asks, why can't two blood brothers marry two blood sisters? So I guess I'm assuming unless they're getting married, I mean, at the same time, like they're because they wind up being in-laws, even if it's a day away, somebody is.
No, but how many stories have you heard of twins marrying twins?
I mean,
but no, we have that. I mean, I've known a situation where brothers have married sisters. I've known of that situation.
Not blood brothers. I mean, not blood sisters, but where like two brothers have married two sisters from another family.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not the.
So I want to be very specific.
Okay. Right. Okay. No. I mean, I've seen that situation before. So I didn't know that we could not do that.
No, I think isn't there there is a restriction when it comes to godparents though, right?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of what that restriction is though. Presbyterian is going to help me out with this.
Let's say a man cannot marry.
A man cannot marry
who his mother is the godmother.
A woman whose mother is the godmother.
So you can't marry your god's brother, your god's sister.
Oh, yes, that's right. Okay, right. So you can't marry your godchild, or if you're the...
You can't marry your mother or father's godchild.
Oh, okay. Mother or father's godchild.
Oh,
your
parents'
Your
parents' godchild. Okay, so in the case...
that would make
So
sense.
if it was two blood brothers, and they were marrying two blood sisters, if there was a godparent relationship between those, then they could not marry. Okay. Oof, man.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, President.
It's probably something you haven't come up run afoul with.
All right, then we have.
Yeah, no, I haven't run into that. No.
So Water Drinker was, asking, is in regards to the communion. I asked because there are a few Orthodox churches around me that I wants to visit them all, but I am not even baptized yet, so I can't receive Holy Communion even once yet.
Correct.
Does offering the Eucharist once a day have something to do with the bridegroom and the bride and the church partaker of the Eucharist? Does the offering of the Eucharist once a day have something to do with the bridegroom and the bride, or like the bridegroom and the bride / the church as the partaker of the Eucharist?
I don't think there's any relationship there. I just think that it is a practice of the monks, because that's really the only place that I see communion being offered, liturgy being performed every day is in the monasteries. I think that's just the practice of the monastery, is that they celebrate the Lord's Supper each day. So,
all right, one more question.
Are we going with
the super chat?
Okay.
Tommy.
So Tommy Williams asks again, has Orthodoxy commented on the doctrine of discovery? I know the Pope recently denounced it.
Discovery?
The doctrine of discovery.
The doctrine of discovery.
If you want to elaborate so a little bit there as far as what the doctrine of discovery entails. I'm
looking that up. Doctrine.
All I can say is I'm not a fan of Star Trek Discovery. I'm a original series Next Generation DS9 guy. That's as far as I go.
Doctrine of discovery. Sounds like it comes out. Ooh, it's a movie.
Oh.
The Doctrine of Discovery, unmasking the domination code, high quality documentary that accurately. Ooh, look at that.
Well, maybe this is a research question, Tommy. We'll take note of that and we'll come back, because that might be a term that is used in other places. It could be a movie, but it could also be something else. So
right.
We should probably do some research on it. We do have one final question in from King Pop Smoke, and don't worry, Tom, we'll be back to it in 2 weeks when we're back on the show. I got you.
I am a current high school student
Mm-hmm.
who does many sports and struggling with fasting because of low protein.
Okay.
What must I do?
Eat protein.
I mean,
Eat protein.
So yeah, I would say, as somebody who has gone, plant-based myself, if it is something that you want to take on, there are definitely ways that you can still get, a good amount of caloric intake. It's, a lot of legumes are great for stuff like that. If it is, if you find yourself wanting to be a participant, in the Orthodox fast, there are definitely ways to get a good amount of protein in. You will most likely be eating a lot more food, which, to some extent, I guess, is a double-edged sword. Within the fast, you might be canonically fasting at that point and not eating meat, but
but I'm saying eat meat.
Yeah.
I'm saying eat meat.
Okay, there you go.
Look, if you if there is a strenuous activity that you're doing, okay,
the body needs to be fueled.
and the body needs to be fueled, then eat what you need to get fueled. Okay. Now, what I'm saying is, okay, fine. Then you eat a piece of chicken and you get protein. Okay, it's inappropriate to eat the whole chicken. All right, because now you're in the sin of gluttony. All right, so don't get caught up in the fast so that it destroys your health, because that's not what the purpose of fasting is, because then that will not bring you that closer to God. So you have to honor the fast in the best way that you can, and if that means that you need to take in some actual protein in the form of chicken or something like that, then that's what you do, and you obviously do that.
Up your prayer life at that point,
right?
Like that's
exactly. So remember, there's always the triad. It's prayer, fasting, and alms. So where one you can't meet it, then you can increase in the other.
And real quick, we got one more super chat, so we're gonna go with it. But I just wanted to throw in something that Justin Messer said. The doctrine of discovery is basically the idea that the church can unilaterally give out lands newly discovered, and goes on to say the Treaty of Tordesillas between Spain and Portugal that divided the Western hemispheres between them was based on the doctrine of discovery. So that's a very interesting road for us to do some research.
I don't know. That smacks of manifest destiny.
Yeah,
right?
I know. That's what's going through my head too.
Yeah, I think from that perspective, I think the answer from the Orthodox position is going to be no.
Yeah, we should take a look into it though. It could be more.
Because this sounds like it has more political connotations than it does theological connotations. But something to
go back to the Great Schism. I mean,
and we will end with our final question here.
All right.
Tommy Williams, again, we appreciate your contribution. Is it true that the further away from God you get, the more the devil and demons leave you alone? Leave you alone? Debatable.
that sounds like they've already led you astray.
Yeah. So,
sure.
No, they will never leave you alone. Because God is omnipresent. He is everywhere. He is always calling you. And demons are always on the watch that should you falter in their eyes and start to turn back to God, they've got to be right there to grab you again. So no, they will not, according to the practices of the Yeronda, of the elders of the church. Certainly, the closer you get to God, the more you will be attacked. Those actions will lessen, or possibly could lessen as you get further away from God, but they will never totally disappear.
All right, and let's do our fourth final question of the night from Kimberly. We're gonna go a little longer just because it's our last show before Holy Week. Kimberly asks, why is the Orthodox Church of America not in communion with the GOC, which they have highlighted as the genuine Orthodox Church?
Well, I don't know. Again, that's like the old Catholic Church. It is a self-proclaimed idea that we are the genuine church. And sometimes that comes out of overly pious people who feel that, like me, have claimed that ecumenism is proper, and so they have left what they feel is the proper church, and they have created their own church, which clearly then puts them in heretical category, because who are they to decide now that the church, what is and is not of the church? So when we hear words like genuine or true or old, these are attempts to reclaim something that was never there to begin with
this kind of holier than thou.
Yes, absolutely.
Mentality.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
Well, that concludes us for this evening. And once again, for those who joined late, we will be taking next week off because we're going to have, I think, between 11 and 12 live streams for Holy Week. But keep an eye out. Tomorrow we're going to have the release of another Greek Orthodox 101 vestment video. And blessings to everyone. We're getting a lot of thank yous and kalopaskas, and we look forward to the upcoming live streams. We have a special guest chanter that's going to be
That's a little
joining us.
surprise. That's right. And again, I strongly recommend during Holy Week, if you're not able to attend the services, we're certainly live streaming the services. But I think a great project for all of our listeners out there is the Mountain of Silence. It's a wonderful book. You've seen me I don't want to say advertise, but you see me talk about this book, Mountain of Silence. It speaks to the heart of what, Evan, we've been talking about the fact that God's got to touch you in the heart. We're not that just reasoning and intellect, observation faith, and that's what this book talks about. And this is a great discussion with one of the elders of Mount Athos, Father Maximus, and it's a conversation with him, and he talks about the idea of Orthodox spirituality, and it's done very, very well. And it's a good read, and something that would benefit you during Holy Week, I believe. All right.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Again, Evan, thanks a lot.
Father, appreciate
once again,
you having me.
And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
No, we're going to see you on Saturday, 10 a.m. for Lazarus Saturday.
Yes, very good.
Live stream.
Fantastic. Take care, everyone.
Have a nice night.
Good night, everyone.